This is the legendary Harley Davidson Knucklehead, and I'm going to tell you guys in a moment why in most cases the most rusted, roughest looking one is more valuable than the cleanest, shiniest looking ones. I'm going to tell you it right here in this video and everything else you need to know about one of the most sought after Harleys on the planet. Now this is my 1937 Harley Davidson Knucklehead, and it was built specifically for the John Parham Museum. The bike was made to look like it's distressed paint. In reality, it's not. If it was all original paint, this thing would be worth closer to the $200,000 mark, but we tested it with some paint depth gauges, and the distress level just looks a little too perfect and a little too consistent throughout the whole bike. However, it is extremely original, and almost all the parts are original to this bike, or at least to a 37. Now, the Harley Davidson Knuckle was made from 1936 to 1947. And during those years, they were evolving and changing and improving the bike, so you had specific individual parts for those specific years. There's things that are on 97 that are only on 97. And that's why when you find one that has all the original parts, it's that much more valuable. If you buy a brand new Harley Davidson, and there's a part for that specific year, and that part breaks, you replace it with the upgrade. You replace it with the newer one, the better one. And what do you do with the old part? You throw it away. You don't keep your old alternator. You don't keep old automotive parts. Well, that's the same thing with these Harley Davidsons. But when you do find one that is all original, has that old stuff, has the one that came on the bike for that year, it gets pretty rare and it gets very valuable. Which is why the ones that have been completely forgotten, you know, lost in the woods, chained to a tree, whatever, you know, found in a basement, they're the most valuable, they're the most sought after, because they are completely original. And in the world of old Harley Davidsons, which is kind of different from the Indian realm, in the world of the old Harley Davidsons, originality means everything, which is unusual, because a lot of people would think that it's not originality but functionality. Or how does it look? Does it look like the most original? Does it look like it came off the showroom floor? It's nothing from this year looks like it came off the showroom floor. Now when you look at this bike, I know what you see. You see the same thing I see. You see an old, very old, ancient Harley Davidson. But when this thing came out, this thing was not an old Harley Davidson. It was one of the most advanced motorcycles on the planet. And for Harley Davidson, it was the first overhead valve dry sump V-twin they'd ever made. Now I know you're thinking that's pretty common nowadays, but you know, one, overhead valve was not common. This was the first overhead valve of, I think, possibly any American motorcycle for sure. And dry sump, before this bike came out, they had what they called a total loss lubrication system, which means the oil started here, went through the engine, and then just ended up on the floor. So yeah, this bike was really, really advanced. So advanced that Harley was actually kind of scared to release it into the market, because they didn't know how people were gonna really perceive it. It was so different. It was also considered to be a very fast motorcycle at the time. Even though the gauge says 120 miles an hour, I think the bike could do around 95. And it was pretty light. This thing weighs 565 pounds, which compared to my my Harley Davidson Road King, that weighs 800 pounds. This thing's really light. And you can tell when you're actually pushing it around, it does feel like a much lighter bike than the modern day cruiser or touring bikes. Now, just to give you an idea of what was going on when this motorcycle came out, just really how old 1937 is. In 1937, a Harley Davidson was around 400 bucks. A automobile was around $760. You could buy a house, the average house was around $5,000, and a pound of hamburger was 12 cents. And the biggest story that happened in 1937, the Hindenburg exploded. This is the same time that the Hindenburg exploded. That's, you know, history, that's old stuff. That's old stuff, you know what I mean? I'm still riding, this is still being ridden, this is still getting used. The Hindenburg, we haven't seen blimps in, I don't know, a long time. Now, I normally learn about bikes when I buy the bike, and it's an expensive way to learn about bikes, but it's a fun way to learn about bikes. And every little tiny minute thing like these, you wonder, you know, how many kids go to their grandparents' house, they find something sitting like this on his workbench, and they throw it away or something like that. If this is not the original one, and it drives me nuts, but if it was, it'd be worth, it doesn't matter what condition it's in, it'd be worth around $3,500. That's how valuable little silly things like this are, because it's a part that can come off the bike, and either they broke and they threw them away or whatever. These are both repops. I want to try to track down the original ones. Also, these bags kind of lost their bulk, their form, and they just kind of sagged down. So I was told to stick some blankets in there or newspaper in there, so it kind of puffs out again. This one has 18,807 miles on it. Who knows how many times that's actually rolled over. Now, when you're cruising on it, you feel just like you do on a modern motorcycle. Wind in your face, all that stuff. Now, the actual driving and the mechanics of it are pretty different. The only things that are the same is right throttle. Right hand is your throttle. This is my accelerator. This is the gas. And right brake. That's the same. Everything else is different. You come over here, this is how you shift gears right here. This up here is your front brake. This is your timing. So this is a retard in advance. So this is how you want to retard. I believe you retard the timing when you start it. And then this down here is your foot clutch. So a way that I kind of remember this, I was taught by Matt Walker, the guys from Wheels Through Time, who helped me get this bike running. Toe to go. This is clutch. This would be clutch in. This would be the same as pulling the lever, and then when you want to go, toe to go. Yeah, I have to think about it while I'm driving it. It's a lot of fun. You're not really you're multitasking, but multitasking to control the bike. The cool thing about this bike is it's already lasted almost 100 years. It's gonna last another 100, and there's nothing more. I mean, back when they were making metal and tin and all these components, they were strong stuff. It was at a good time in America. We're making quality things. Now, was it the best possible design? Not necessarily, but the fact that it works this much later, maybe it was the best design. Let's go take it for a spin. All right, so before we do this test drive, let's do the words of wisdom. Hebrews 13:16, and do not forget to do good and share with others, for with such sacrifice, God is pleased. All right, so here's how you start it. Neutral, toe to go, clutch down. Now, I've already started it earlier, so this should be easy. When you start a bike like this, don't start it like a dirt bike, where you kick down and come back up. On a bike like this, when you kick your foot down, you leave it down. So you're doing a lot of stuff. You're thinking about a lot of things when you're riding these machines. Also, the brake, I gotta move my whole foot up. I gotta use my whole leg to use the brake. It's just not a very, just kind of the position of it. Now, when the Knucklehead came out, it was said to be one of the most comfortable and powerful motorcycles out there. I mean, it really was a pretty revolutionary design, a design that is, most of which is still being used. Such a fun bike to ride. And it's so funny because people will look into my shop, and if you don't know, you don't know, but they'll look at all the other bikes and they don't even notice. They won't even notice this one. So normally when you start it, now my bike's a little different, I'm not sure why. Normally when you start one of these, the sequence is something like this. Ignition off, prime the fuel system a couple times, kick the fuel system. I think I think maybe at that point you're on half throttle. And then pull the choke out. And give it a little bit of a timing. And then you give it a kick. And it should fire up for a moment, and then take the choke off, give it quarter throttle. You should be able to, I think at that point you get off timing, and then it should fire up. There's that big half hour. Now, after doing it for a while, after riding the bike for a little while, maybe an hour or two, it becomes second nature, and it's pretty normal and it's natural of what you're supposed to do. Upshifting, I can do it without really thinking about it. Downshifting, I still kind of have to, think a little bit about it. But riding motorcycles sometimes gets a little too easy. This is why the automatic bike never really caught on. I know Honda makes the best one, and it's actually a really great bike. But in terms of all the manufacturers, people want to do stuff. So, if they wanted a scooter, they would just buy a scooter. This motorcycle is such a cool timepiece that belongs in a museum. And actually, in reality, it was in a museum. It was built for a museum. It was built for a museum, and it stayed there for at least a decade. But that's not where it belongs. It belongs on the street. Someone should be riding it. And it's so cool how this old technology, like the Springer front end and the Pogo back end, there's seals that they're not really going to break. And I don't know, I love the idea this bike could still be running in another 100 years. And we know that because it lasted the first 100 years. I think this is the horn. I don't know. You hear it? I can barely hear it, and it almost feels like when I press it, it loses power a little bit. Now I'm going to put it in second, and I should be able to, well, no, I'm going pretty slow. There we go, put it right in first. Now this is the stock clutch lever mechanism, so it just stays there. I have to rock it both ways. It'd be like if you're hand clutch, you have to push it in and out. So it's definitely different. Now you can get a Srkcycles clutch, or like a racing clutch that would spring back, which I think would be pretty cool. I think that'd be easier to ride. But I think this is pretty cool and it's fun. I mean, I'm glad I learned how to do it. Now I know on my WLA, it might be the same with this, but these look like performance bars. They look like what they call Flanders bars. And a set of bars in this shape, if that is what it is, it might be how it is stock, I'm not sure. But I know on my WLA, the Flanders bars, someone offered me $3,500 for them, and they looked awful. They were rusted out, they were beat up. But people love that stuff, and there's still a lot of value in that stuff, and they want it that way. They want it the way it looks. They wanted that barn find look, because they were going to put it on their bike that looks the same. Like I said before, they want that originality. That's where the real value actually is. Now compared to an old 45, like the blue one I have, or the red one, my red one's pretty modified, but compared to the blue one, this thing's just a powerhouse. If back in the day you were used to riding the old 45, this is a 61. I mean, this is much, much bigger, much more powerful. And the difference would have been night and day. A couple years ago in the 80s, it's funny how values for old stuff kind of works, where there's always a point, there's almost always a point where it's not worth very much and no one really wants it because it's almost too new. In the 80s, these things, no one really cared about them. You could probably could have picked up this bike for $8,000, and if you did that, that made a pretty decent investment. Because now something like this is around 90 to 100, and the more original ones with the original paint are doing upwards of 180. I'm hoping they continue going up. Now you notice this little guy. This was This was aftermarket, but this was current era aftermarket. Same thing with those little gems on the back. That was what people did, and there's, you know, it makes it original, it makes it cool, and just like we do today. In the same way that we like to modify our bikes today, it's cooler to keep it in the era of when it was built. It would not be cool to put like an LED in the front, you know. If you can't see, you can't see. Now these bikes do leak. If they're not leaking, you have a problem. That means everything that should have been leaking out is all gone. I keep a big pan and a pig mat underneath this one, and you know, it leaks. That's how they were. I like to think that everything in the 30s leaked a little bit. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it though, and that's very different from like the 80s Harley Davidsons that actually had casting problems and they had clearance issues. This is just, you know, pre-war problems. Now, even though they did race these motorcycles, I don't want to race it. I mean, I know what a race bike should feel like, and I hit a bump going around a corner, and it's just, everything's bouncing around. I mean, the suspension is just springs, which is, you know, great, but there's no quick rebound. It doesn't bring you back to stable in any type of speedy way. It just kind of keeps on clouding and floating around. All right, guys, check this other video up here. I think you're gonna really like it. We'll see you guys next time. And remember, it is not what you're riding, but where you're going.